Okay, so if you recall from lesson number 10, we did the same exact slide. What we're going to solve for here is A. That's why that A is orangish in color. And it's a little bit of a fractional equation, so I just want to emphasize how we handle it. The first thing we want to do is get rid of this 1/2. And 1/2 means to divide by 2. For example, take the number 10, divide it by 2, you get 5. And take the number 10 and multiply by 1/2. In other words, what's half of 10? And you get 5. So just multiplying both sides by 2 will get rid of the fraction part. So now I have 2a equals h times a plus b. Now, if I divide by h, I'm getting closer and closer to getting a by itself. And when we solve for something, we want it to say, in this case, a equals, whatever you're solving for equals. So 2a divided by h is a plus b. And last but not least, we just got to subtract b from both sides, and we get a equals 2a over h minus b. I'm not particularly fond about how they switch sides there, but nonetheless, that's step-by-step what goes on without a lot of work shown, but that is what's going on. Okay, so again, we taught these the other day. Here's 4 questions for you to do. Let's have you do one at a time, starting with, actually, I think you could do numbers 1 and 2. So we'll do 1 and 2, and then we'll do 3, and then we'll do 4. So do 1 and 2, stop and start, and then I'll go over them with you. All right, so with number 1, literal equations, notes, strategies, things we have to keep in mind. First, you want to make it say whatever it says equals. So for example, number 1, you want it to say x equals. It says solve for x. Number 2, you want it to say x equals. Number 3, you want it to say y equals. And number 4, you want it to say, well, that's strange that it says solve for y, but I believe we are going to solve for x on number 4, okay? It's often used with formulas. For instance, one formula for perimeter of a rectangle is P equals 2L plus 2W. And you might want to solve for W if you were told the perimeter. And in some ways, they're even easier than equations, namely that you can't make careless number mistakes. All right, so without any further ado, numbers 1 and 2. Number 1, we want to get x all by itself, so we subtract the a. Now, what is b minus a? I haven't a clue. No idea, but it is b minus a. I know that's what it is, so just leave it. And then I divide both sides by 2. Now, I am not bothering to do this here, but normally we would die, cancel, let Sasquatch squish, have aliens abduct the 2 over 2. They equal 1, and 1 times x is just x. So these 2 over 2s, they disappear, they go die. And I just get x equals b minus a over 2. As far as number 2 goes, this is even easier. It says s equals 4x. Well, to get x by itself, I have to do the inverse of, or do the opposite of multiplying by 4, which is to divide by 4. Again, those 4s cancel out, go die, so I get x equals s over 4. All right, number 3. Give it a shot. We'll do stop and start. All right. So I want to solve for y, which means I want to get y all by itself. My first step is to subtract x from both sides, okay? And once I'm done subtracting x from both sides, I then have to divide by s. That gets y by itself. Again, the s's cancel each other out, go die. And I get y equals t minus x over s. Last but not least, I want to get x by itself because it says solve for y, but we're going to treat it as solve for x. And I'm going to add 5 to both sides. That gives me c plus 5, and then I divide by b. It's the same exact steps that were done on numbers 1 and 3. Same exact steps on number 4. You just got to get used to seeing something like c plus 5 and leave it there. So often in math, we would say, okay, well, that equals 8 or that equals 10. But no, just c plus 5 is c plus 5. Nothing I can do with it. All right. Now we have 5 more literal equations for you to solve. And we're going to go through and do this one at a time. So let's do number 1, solve for y, which you know says y equals. After each question, we're going to do stop and start. I'm going back one. I planned this wrong. Do all 5 questions. Go ahead, do all 5 of them, and then I'll show you the answers to all 5. All right, so here's your answers. In the first one, first thing we have to do is subtract the m, then we divide by 2. Okay, see how we would subtract the m, divide by 2? Next one, solving for s, I would add the a, divide by... Oh, I made a mistake on this. Yo muy malo. My bad. It says solve for s. I thought it said solve for t. So it says solve for s. I should have divided by t. It should be t plus a over t. Sorry. Number 3, solve for g. Cross multiply here. R times e is re, like you do with percents. And then you have underneath the r is a 1. So 1 times f plus g is just f plus g. Since I'm solving for g, I subtract f from both sides, and I get re minus f. Make sure it's in that order, because the f is negative here. It better say negative here. You can't have f minus re. That would be wrong. The f is negative here. It's got to be negative here. Next one, r plus g equals 4, solving for r squared r. I showed you the steps on this. The first thing you have to do is get rid of this radical here. So I square both sides. If I square the square root of r plus g, I just get r plus g. Squares and square roots are inverse operations. They undo each other, so the radical's no longer involved. But since I squared both sides, I had to do 4 squared. That gets me 16. And then I subtract g from both sides. And I get r equals 16 minus g. I won't put anything like that on the quiz, but next week I'm going to have to include more like that so that you get more comfortable with them. And as far as number 5 goes, solving for y, first I subtract the 2x from both sides, then I divide by the 3. Keep in mind, this 2x has to stay negative, so it's 5 minus 2x, not the other way around. It's closely related. The concept of the order there is very similar to the idea of less than or fewer than. And what is negative here in the operation? The 2x has to stay negative here in the solution, 5 minus 2x. Okay, that is some work with literal equations.